This week we come to number 11 in our series on the book of Daniel. This is Daniel chapter 10, From Battle to Victory. And we're coming to the great conclusion and the high point really of the book of Daniel. All the material we have for this time is centering on that vision in chapter 10 of encouragement and explanation. And we're given Ephesians chapter 6 as well. We're not fighting against human forces, but against supernatural rulers and powers, the dark lords of this world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavens. So we get the whole great controversy picture here. This is what we're really thinking about as we view through Daniel's eyes the history from then till now. And all that we've been studying through the book of Daniel has been related to that as we've looked at all the various aspects, the dreams, the visions, the prophecy and so on. It's all pointing to the end when God is going to finally be vindicated, and all those who've chosen to be with him, to say that right is right and wrong is wrong, are going to be there with him too. And we have this great picture of Gabriel, even Michael, battling to persuade the king of Persia. It's very interesting, isn't it, that we actually have the curtain pushed aside, as it were, and we see God's hand at work through the beings that he sent, Gabriel, Michael representing, of course, Jesus, God himself. And we have an intense view here of the great conflicts in the great controversy. Now, there are many different understandings of Daniel chapter 11 in our faith community, and you can look at some of them there. But what I want to point to is the fact that whether we think this about the king of the north or that about the king of the south and all the other things involved, we have some specific identifications. As I've mentioned, we already talked about the king of Persia. The most important thing is that we trust in the evidence that God has provided, so that we can have confidence that God will indeed bring it through to the end. Jesus says we can't come to the kingdom without trusting in him, and we have to trust what God has said. And even here in Daniel, we have to trust that however we understand it, the main thrust of the message is that God is directing all that is happening, taking it all and bringing it to a conclusion that vindicates him because he is truly right and good. He gives us freedom of choice. He gives all these kings the freedom of choice. They demonstrate in their actions who they are and whose side they're on and so on. But the most important thing is, as we see in the material here, in the quotes, in the Ellen White comments, that God is truly shown to be God, the Almighty King of heaven. Let me read a few of those comments from Ellen White. Quoting Daniel 10 verses 12 and 13. By this we see that heavenly agencies have to contend with hindrances before the purpose of God is fulfilled in its time. The king of Persia was controlled by the highest of all evil angels. He refused, as did Pharaoh, to obey the word of the Lord. Gabriel declared he withstood me 21 days by his representations against the Jews. But Michael came to his help, and then he remained with the kings of Persia, holding the powers in check, giving right counsel against evil counsel. And then she goes on to say, good and evil angels are taking a part in the planning of God in his earthly kingdom. It is God's purpose to carry forward his work in correct lines in ways that would advance his glory. But Satan is ever trying to counterwork God's purpose. Only by humbling themselves before God can God's servants advance his work. Never are they to depend on their own efforts or an outward display for successes. There's some great material for us to think about in our day as we try and represent through our own actions, our own characters, the nature and character of the God that we love. May that be our conclusion for this week.